Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with the profile for my Ghostrick Flex deck, the 5th annual incarnation of my Halloween Ghostrick builds. This year, I've combined win conditions, putting both mill and beatdown together inside of a single flexible shell, allowing me to easily switch between either tactic depending on the situation. Now, if you'd like to see this deck in action, you can check out the main What a Deck video, should be linked in the description. There I'll be doing a bunch of duels, just showing off how this deck plays. Otherwise here, I'm just going to go card by card, explain how this thing is supposed to work, and why I played what I did. For a monster lineup, we have one each of the three Stooges, Frankie, Skelly, and Ghoul, 3 copies of Chinese Dracula, 3 copies of Multirole on legs, 1 Bride of Chucky, 3 White Lanterns, 3 Boo! 3 Mirror Mirror, and 3 Battle Fader. He's fading your bat. 4 spells were on 2 Extravagant Pots, 1 Terraforming, 2 Welcome to the Black Parades, and 3 of Disney's Haunted Mansion. For traps, we're playing 3 Raigeki in trap form, kind of, 3 Toilet Mirror Force, 1 Field Spell Swapper, 1 2-for-1, 3 of the Scariest Trap, and 1 each of Metalverse, Javerus, and Unending Nightmare. Our extra deck, which is built with Pot of Extravagance in mind, consists of 3 mommies, 3 daddies, 3 little sisters, 3 big brothers, and 3 cute neighbors. The side deck I'll go over in a bit. So as for how to play this thing, it's a fairly standard Ghostrick build. If you're unfamiliar with the archetype, there are 2 key things you need to know right off the bat. First, all the monsters have the effect that they can change themselves to face down defense position once per turn. Secondly, all the field spells say that neither player can attack face-down monsters, but if all their opponent's monsters are face-down, they can attack directly. These 2 effects in combination facilitate all your other plays, allowing you to stall and swarm with great effectiveness, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. The field spells in particular are really important for this, which is why we play 2 of them. If you're trying to get set up, you'll want Parade. In addition to the previously mentioned effect, it says every time your opponent declares a direct attack, you can add a Ghostrick card from your deck to your hand, which is an amazing effect that can allow you multiple searches each turn, assuming your opponent is trying to kill you, which they probably are. Unfortunately, it also says your opponent takes no damage while this card is out, which is why we really only use it to get set up. Once you've got your field established, you'll want to swap it out for Ghostrick Mansion, which, in addition to protecting your face-down card, says all damage inflicted by monsters is halved, except for Ghostricks. So let's say your monsters are now safely face down, you've got Parade out, you're searching a whole lot, but you're also being attacked directly a bunch, which is kind of worrying. How are you going to survive all these direct attacks? Well, Drowning Mirror Force returns all attack position monsters to the deck when your opponent declares a direct attack. Ghostrick Lantern can summon itself from the hand face down to negate a direct attack, or an attack against a Ghostrick. And same thing with the Battle Fader, it summons itself to negate, except it only negates direct attacks, summons itself face up, but it ends the whole battle phase, preventing your opponent from committing subsequent attacks. Now the important thing to remember with all this is that you get the search off of Parade even if the attack doesn't go through, and you can activate multiple cards on a single attack declaration. So if your opponent attacks you, you can activate Parade to search something, then chain Lantern in hand to negate the attack and summon a Ghostrick, allowing you to go plus while stalling and swarming. Unfortunately, because of the way timing works, you can't search a lantern and then immediately use it to block an attack. That's the first thing I tried. Has to be already in hand. But you can search Mary, which is almost as good. She's a hand trap that says when you take damage, you can discard this card and summon any Ghostrick from the deck in face-down defense position. So they attack, you search Mary, take the damage, and then summon anything you want. Most of the time, you'll be getting Jiangshi. This helpful little dude says if it's flipped face up, you can search a Ghostrick whose level is equal to or less than the number of Ghostricks you control. So if you flip him up just by himself, you get a level 1 Ghostrick. If you've got 2 lanterns on board because you negated attacks and you flip them up along with him, then you can get any monster in the deck because you'll have 3 Ghostricks and their monsters only go up to 3. Sometimes you might also want to search Doll. When she's flipped up, her effect activates. Says during the end phase, flip all monsters face down, then summon a Ghostrick from the deck with a level equal to or less than the number of monsters you flipped. Before links, this was a 3 of because it put your opponent's monsters face down while getting your playmakers out of the deck. These days it's a little slow, you only really bring her out against fields of non-link monsters. Either way, the game plan is use all of these to swarm and stall until you get like 3 or 4 monsters on board. Once that happens, you can go into Phase 2, which is Lockdown. There is a Ghostrick Ixie for all 3 levels of Ghostricks, so if you get any 2 monsters at the same level on the field, you can make one of these. They all have their own unique effects that I won't be going into, mostly because you'll just be using these as stepping stones to get into Angel of Mischief. This is a rank 4 Ixie that you can just slap on top of any other Ghostrick Ixie, and its effect is once per turn you can detach to search a Ghostrick spell or trap. Unless you already have it, you are going to be searching for Ghostrick Scare. This is the stall card. It says flip up any number of face-down monsters you control, count the number of Ghostricks, then you can flip that many monsters your opponent controls face down without targeting them. Against non-link monsters, this thing just ends your opponent's turn, because usually you'll have 4 or 5 face-down Ghostricks at this point, and you can just flip your opponent's entire board and prevent them from doing anything. Obviously, you can't flip link monsters face down, but this still helps against them. By putting face-up monsters on your side of the field, you assure that your opponent can't attack you directly, instead forcing them to chew through a wall of 5 defense position monsters before they can get to your gooey life point center. And even that we have protection against. Ghostrick Spectre says if a Ghostrick gets destroyed, you can summon this face down and draw a card. Ghostrick Break says if one Ghostrick is destroyed, you can summon 2 with different names from your graveyard. And Ghostrick Lantern, if you recall, can summon itself to negate an attack against another Ghostrick. In addition, we've also got Needle Sealing, which destroys all face-up monsters, as long as there are 4 or more monsters on the field total, which, you know, gets rid of most link monsters before the battle phase even arrives, while leaving your face-down Ghostricks untouched. Anyway, once you've got control of the board, then you can bring in your win conditions, of which we have 2. Ghoul is for the Beatdown. It says you can target 1 Ghostrick, and it gains attack equal to the combined attack of all other Ghostricks on the field. If you've just got like this, Stein and Angel of Mischief on board, that'll bring the monster up to 4,700 attack, which should be more than enough to beat over any links your opponent still has. More than likely, you'll have even more attack, and if your opponent doesn't have any links, then you can just flip all their monsters face down and attack directly. It might take 2 or 3 turns to finish them off, but given how well this deck stalls, that shouldn't be a problem. Alternatively, if your opponent is making it difficult to attack, you can just get Mr. Bones. His effect is, when he's flipped up, you can banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck, face down, equal to the number of Ghostricks you control. Usually 5. It's a bit slower than Ghoul, but if you've got a solid lockdown going, this can sometimes be the safer bet, especially if your opponent has already done half the work for you by searching, drawing, and milling through half their deck. As for why we play 2 win conditions instead of focusing on just 1, I found that it works better for the diverse format we're in right now. Ghoul is really effective against link monsters, and it's the faster strategy, but once people realize what you're doing, they can go into stall mode, find ways to prevent your attacks one way or another, and given how much this deck can search once it gets going, you're actually in danger of decking out in a pure stall game. In that case, it's good to have Skeleton to fall back on, banishing 5 or 10 cards and putting your opponent behind you. I should also briefly mention Ghostrick Burn. That's what I originally intended to do this year, and if you want to add a 3rd win condition to this deck, you can do so with just a single card. I didn't include it in here, but there's a card called Ghostrick Warwolf that essentially does what Skeleton does, except when it's flipped up, it inflicts 100 damage for every set card on the field. This used to be viable a few years back when people actually set trap cards and you could reliably keep all your opponent's monsters face down. But in 2019, I was struggling to do more than 600 damage per turn, and at that rate you're better off just playing Wave Motion Cannon or something. Anyway, all that leaves is our tech cards. Stein has the highest attack of any main deck Ghostrick, and if it inflicts damage to your opponent, you can add a Ghostrick spell trap from your deck to your hand, which makes him good to pair up with Ghoul. The newest addition to the Ghostrick family, Ghostrick Fairy, isn't key to any combos, but it's a 3-of staple just for its utility. When it's flipped face up, you can take a Ghostrick card in your graveyard, either a monster or a spell trap, and set it to your field. And then, you can flip monsters your opponent controls face down, equal to the number of set cards you control, which will always be at least 1 since, you just set a card. Whatever you get out of the graveyard is banished if it leaves the field, which is why I call this thing Multirole on legs. It essentially does for Ghostricks what that card did for Sky Strikers, just much slower. Not only does this allow you to play a bunch of 1-ofs reliably since you can recycle them, but it also gives you 6 uses of your primary disruption, which is more than enough turns to finish off your opponent regardless of if you're using beat or mill. Overall, just a great addition to the deck. Thank you, Konami. Now give us a link, or at least like an archetypal way to get rid of links aside from battle, because Avramax is hard to deal with. Regardless, after that we've got Terraforming and Metaverse. These just search your field spells. Renovation lets you return an active field spell to the hand and then activate a field spell from the deck or hand. Could be a different one, could be the exact same one. At worst, it lets you dodge your way out of spell trap removal, and at best, it lets you swap from your build-a-board mode to kill mode. Finally, we have Jar of Avarice to recycle, since this is a grindy-ass deck, and 1 copy of Unending Nightmare as our spell trap removal. Actual traps don't really bother Ghostricks all that much, but floodgates can be a problem, so we have this to take care of them. If you're unfamiliar with this card, it's a continuous trap, lets you pay 1,000 to pop face-up spell traps. We're only playing it at 1 since it's only useful in niche situations, and we can usually deck thin our way into getting it. If you're finding that you need it urgently, there's 2 more copies in the side deck that you can always put in. Likewise, we've got additional copies of Break, Renovation, Ghoul, and Skeleton, if you find that one in particular is really good in this matchup, and you want more copies. Finally, we have our unique side deck cards. Ghostrick Vanish can prevent your face-down cards from being targeted and destroyed, which is good if your opponent has a lot of field nukes or a lot of targeting banished effects. And then there's also the Kaiju suite to deal with decks that are really link-heavy. Slumber is more removal and or bait for negations, and the Kaijus themselves can get rid of troublesome monsters, while also giving your opponent something that you can flip face down. And with that, I think we're done. You should have more than enough knowledge you need to play and understand this deck. If not, comment down in the comments, I'll answer any questions, or just check out the main video. There I'll be playing actual duels with the Ghostricks and showing off how they work in 2019. As I said before, should be linked on the end card and down in the description. Anyway, until next time, good luck and have fun.